This week on Vatican Connections, we focus on Pope Francis's papal trip to Cairo, Egypt. The Vatican confirmed President Trump will be meeting with the Holy Father, and we share with you the Pope's prayer intention for May. Hello and welcome to Vatican Connections. I'm Emily Callan. This is the first week of May, and you know what that means. The Pope has a new prayer intention which he shares with the whole Church, and this is also done with the help of the International Prayer Network. So to get us started today, here is the Holy Father's special prayer request for this month.
Cuando miramos a África, vemos mucho más que sus grandes riquezas naturales. Vemos su alegría de vivir y sobre todo un motivo de esperanza en su rico patrimonio intelectual, cultural y religioso. Pero no podemos dejar de ver las guerras fratricidas que causan tantas víctimas inocentes entre las poblaciones y destruyen esas riquezas naturales y culturales. Unámonos a nuestros hermanos de ese gran continente y pidamos juntos por los cristianos de África para que den un testimonio profético de reconciliación, de justicia y paz, imitando a Jesús misericordioso.
Pope Francis will receive President Donald Trump on May 24th at the Vatican. The announcement was confirmed by the Vatican press office on Thursday. As is custom, the American president will not only meet with the Holy Father, but also with the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, and with the Secretary for Relations with States, Archbishop Paul Gallagher. This visit is part of a larger foreign trip for President Trump. He is scheduled to go to Israel and Saudi Arabia, attend a NATO meeting in Brussels, and a G7 summit in Sicily. The Vatican also announced the establishment of full diplomatic relations with Myanmar. The Pope met with the country's de facto leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, just before the announcement was made. This means the Holy Father will appoint a nuncio and Myanmar will appoint an ambassador to the Holy See. The communiqué from the Holy See stated that both states are keen to promote bonds of mutual friendship and jointly agreed to establish diplomatic relations. To the representatives of the Secretariat for Communications, Pope Francis said to not be afraid of the word reform as they gathered this week for their first plenary assembly. The reform of the Vatican communications began in 2015 with a motu proprio from Pope Francis. It involves the unification of all of its communication platforms. But in his speech, the Holy Father clarified that the reform isn't just about merging these platforms, but about responding more effectively to the mission of the Church. He urged them to make their guiding criterion an apostolic one, a missionary one, with a special attention to the situations of hardship, poverty, and difficulty which people face nowadays, and by making the most of human resources without substituting the communication of the local churches, and at the same time supporting the ecclesial communities most in need. The Order of Malta elected a new leader this week. Fra Giacomo Dalla Torre, an Italian, will be at the head of the order for 1 year until a Grand Master is officially chosen. He is replacing Fra Matthew Festing, who resigned last January following a crisis within the governing body of the order. Pope Francis had also intervened and encouraged the Knights to renew its spiritual life. So, the election of this new leader ad interim is the first step in a process to reform the constitution of the Order of Malta. And there are about 13,500 members around the world today. When Pope Francis canonizes the two shepherd children in Fatima next week, Jacinta and Francisco Marto, they will become the youngest non-martyrs in the history of the Church to be declared saints. Francisco died at the age of 11 and his sister Jacinta was 10. In this next segment, we'll be focusing on the Holy Father's most recent apostolic voyage to Egypt. It was a significant trip, a trip which had a threefold purpose. First, to encourage the Catholic and Christian minority, then to solidify relations with the Christians, particularly with Coptic Orthodox and with the Muslim communities. It was pastoral, ecumenical, and interreligious. So let's go back to Cairo 1 week ago. The Pope landed in Cairo, in Egypt, last Friday. He immediately made his way to the presidential palace for the official welcome ceremony, where he was received by the President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and the two had a private meeting. Following this meeting, Pope Francis traveled to Al-Azhar to meet the Grand Imam Ahmad al-Tayyib. Al-Azhar is the highest-ranking institution in Sunni Islam. Both leaders held a private meeting as well before making their way to the Al-Azhar Conference Center to speak at the International Conference for Peace. The Holy Father addressed the participants, his first major speech of his visit. He stressed the importance of education to build a land of peace and centered on the human person. This, likewise, is linked with interreligious dialogue, on which the future also depends. He insisted on the timeliness of their meeting, where today there is a danger to use religion and faith for personal interests. His main focus, however, was on violence done in the name of religion, which is, in reality, he said, the negation of every authentic religious expression. He called upon religious leaders to reject any form of violence, vengeance, and hatred carried out in the name of religion or in the name of God, and to affirm the incompatibility of faith and violence, of belief and hatred. The Grand Imam also spoke to those gathered and had similar words. Catholic News Service prepared this clip from their speeches.
Dio, amante della vita, non cessa di amare l'uomo e per questo lo esorta a contrastare la vita della violenza, quale presupposto fondamentale di ogni alleanza sulla terra. Ad attuare questo imperativo sono chiamate anzitutto e oggi in particolare le religioni, perché mentre ci troviamo nell'urgente bisogno dell'assoluto, è imprescindibile escludere qualsiasi assolutazione che giustifichi forme di violenza. La violenza, infatti, è la negazione di ogni autentica religiosità.
وكيف شهد عصر حقوق الإنسان من الأعمال الهمجية ما لم يشهده عصر من قبل، والإجابة التي أعتقد أن حضراتكم توافقونني عليها هي تجاهل الحضارة الحديثة للأديان الإلهية.
Later, the Pope met with civil authorities. About 800 members of government institutions and the diplomatic corps were present. Following that, at the end of his first day in Cairo, he paid a courtesy visit to the Patriarch of the Coptic Orthodox Church, Pope Tawadros II. During their time together, they held a private meeting. Each delivered an address and presented each other with gifts. They also signed a common declaration. The document is divided into 12 points where they give thanks for the bonds of fraternity and friendship existing between the of St. Peter and the See of St. Mark. They recalled the areas where they can already find common ground, namely their profession of faith in the triune God, their belief in the divinity of Jesus, that divine life is nourished through the 7 sacraments and the special role of the Virgin Mary. But they also remembered the important steps that have been taken in recent years, calling to mind meetings between the previous Catholic and Coptic popes from Paul VI to John Paul II. This love finds deepest expression in common prayer, they said, and in the face of contemporary challenges, Christians are called to be witnesses of unity and harmony. They will seek sincerely not to repeat the baptism that has been administered in either of their churches for any person who wishes to join the other. Both popes went together to the Church of Saints Peter and Paul, which was attacked last December by members of ISIS. There they prayed and laid flowers in honor of the victims. On Saturday, the Holy Father began his day by celebrating Mass with the Catholic community at Cairo's soccer stadium. Con-celebrating with him was the Patriarch of Alexandria and of the Coptic Catholics, Ibrahim Isaac Sidrak, who thanked the Pope for his visit. During the Holy Mass, Pope Francis gave a homily, and reflecting on the journey to Emmaus, he urged Catholics and Christians to be fanatics in charity. Any other fanaticism, which is not love, does not come from God, he said. Here's a clip of his homily from CNS.
Assalamu alaikum. Cari fratelli e sorelle, Dio gradisce solo la fede professata con la vita, perché l'unico estremismo ammesso per i credenti è quello della carità. Qualsiasi altro estremismo non viene da Dio e non piace a Lui. Ora, come i discepoli di Emmaus, tornate alla vostra Gerusalemme, cioè alla vostra vita quotidiana, alle vostre famiglie, al vostro lavoro e alla vostra cara patria, pieni di gioia, di coraggio e di fede. Non abbiate paura di aprire il vostro cuore alla luce del risorto e lasciate che Lui trasformi la vostra incertezza in forza positiva per voi e per gli altri. Non abbiate paura di amare tutti, amici e nemici, perché nell'amore vissuto sta la forza e il tesoro del credente. La Vergine Maria e la Sacra Famiglia che vissero su questa terra benedetta illumino i nostri cuori e benedicano voi e il caro Egitto che all'alba del cristianesimo accolse l'evangelizzazione di San Marco e diede lungo la storia numerosi martiri e una grande schiera di santi e di sante. Al-Masikam Bilakikakam.
The Holy Father's meeting with clergy and religious was the final step of his voyage. After Mass, he traveled to the Coptic Catholic Patriarchal Seminary of Mahdi on the outskirts of Cairo to join men and women religious in a prayer service. The Holy Father gave one final speech and spoke to the 1,500 consecrated people and seminarians who were there. CNS has more.
La vostra identità come figli della Chiesa è quella di essere copti, cioè radicati nelle vostre nobili e antiche radici, e di essere cattolici, cioè parte della Chiesa una e universale, come un albero che più è radicato nella terra, più alto nel cielo. La Santa Famiglia vi protegga e benedica tutti voi, il vostro Paese e tutti i suoi abitanti.
Before leaving them, there was a renewal of vows, the recitation of the Our Father, and the Pope's final blessing. Then, after spending 27 hours in Egypt, Pope Francis was brought back to the airport and boarded his return flight to Rome. On his flight back from Egypt and heading back to Rome, Pope Francis held a press conference for journalists on the papal plane. During that press conference, he touched upon many topics, including his meeting with the President al-Sisi, populism in Europe, the Holy See's position towards Venezuela, relations with the Orthodox community, and the crisis in North Korea. Matteo Cioffi has more.
Responding to the first question about the meeting with President al-Sisi, the pontiff also mentioned Giulio Regeni, the young Italian researcher who died in Egypt for causes which are not clear. The Holy Father confirmed the work of the Vatican regarding this affair, even after the request of the young man's parents, but he didn't want to explain in what terms the Holy See has worked. Regarding the French political situation and the next elections, Pope Francis said every country is free to make the choices it believes are right for itself. I cannot judge if it's making this choice for this reason or another, because I don't know its internal politics. It is true that Europe is in a danger of coming undone. This is true. Still on the topic of international political situations, the Holy Father answered a question on the crisis in Venezuela. There was the intervention of the Holy See at the insistent request of the 4 presidents who were working as facilitators, the pontiff said, and it didn't succeed. It was left there. It didn't succeed because the proposals were not acceptable or were diluted. The opposition itself is divided, and on the other hand, it seems that the conflicts are increasingly escalating. Speaking of Coptic Pope Tawadros II, Pope Francis said he has a special friendship with him, and he considers him as a man of God, repeating that ecumenism is moving along with charity that works together. There is no static ecumenism, the Holy Father insisted. On the delicate situation in North Korea, Pope Francis said the situation of the Korean missiles has been going on for 1 year, but now it seems that the situation has heated up too much. In every instance, my call is to solve problems by means of diplomacy through negotiation, because the future of humanity is at play. Today, a prolonged war will destroy, I will not say half of humanity, but a good part of humanity and of culture, everything. It would be terrible. The Pope has therefore called on the UN to reclaim somewhat their leadership, because it has been watered down. He then stated that he is willing to meet Trump as he did it for all the other heads of state who asked an audience, and he joked about the impossibility of seeing the pyramids during his Egyptian trip.
Instead of his usual catechesis, the Holy Father reflected on his trip to Egypt in his general audience on Wednesday in St. Peter's Square. He especially thanked Egyptians for welcoming him and for making the trip run so smoothly. Here is a summary of his speech.
Dear brothers and sisters, my recent apostolic journey to Egypt took place at the invitation of the President of the Republic, the Coptic Orthodox Patriarch, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, and the Coptic Catholic Patriarch. I thank all those who helped in its planning and organization. My meeting with the Grand Imam and my message to the International Conference for Peace recalled that peace is the fruit of an education to wisdom and a humanism that respects the religious dimension of our existence. our covenant with God, grounded in the commandment of love of God and neighbor, inspires our efforts to build a just and peaceful civil order in which all have a part to play. Egypt's great cultural and religious heritage gives the nation a special role in this work of peacemaking. In my meeting with the Coptic Orthodox Patriarch, Pope Tawadros II, we reaffirmed our mutual commitment to unity and prayed together for the victims of the recent attacks. At Mass with the Catholic community and in my meeting with the priests, religious, and seminarians, I saw the beauty of the Church in Egypt, and I encouraged everyone to persevere in the hope of the gospel. May the Holy Family, who once found refuge in Egypt, bless and protect its people with prosperity, fraternity, and peace.
On May 10, 1973, Blessed Pope Paul VI met Coptic Pope Shenouda III, the previous head of the Coptic Orthodox Church in Egypt. It was the first encounter between the leaders of both churches, and at that moment, both leaders had also signed a common declaration. It led to the creation of a commission for theological dialogue between the Catholic and Orthodox churches. The Holy Father is scheduled for yet another international trip just next week, but it will be more of a pilgrimage. He is going to Fatima, Portugal, to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Marian apparitions to 3 shepherd children, 2 of which will be canonized by him during a Mass already scheduled for May 13th, on the feast of Our Lady of Fatima. The Pope will be there for 2 days, from May 12th to the 13th, and another highlight of his pilgrimage will be the blessing of the candles and the recitation of the Rosary. During his visit, he will also meet with the President, Marcelo Rebelo, and have lunch with the bishops of Portugal. He is the 4th Pope to visit the Shrine of Our Lady of Fatima. Benedict XVI, John Paul II, and Paul VI have gone before him. May Saint Joseph give young people the ability to dream, to take risks for big tasks, the things that God dreams for us. And that's all for our show this week. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send them via Vatican Connections Twitter page at Vatican Connections. I'll be happy to answer them on our next episode. And again, if you are new to the show or returning viewer, we at Salt and Light value your feedback on the content we produce. So if you would like to tell us how we're doing, please visit saltandlighttv.org/VC survey to send us your comments directly to our programming team. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next week on an all-new episode of Vatican Connections.